Welcome to the Deconstructing Data podcast. I'm Jessie Lezak, CMO at BDEX, along with David Finkelstein, founder and CEO at BDEX. How's it going, David?
Hey, Jessie. It's going well. I'm temporarily back in my temporary housing, but this is the last time. So we're going to close this place up and I'll be back in Sanibel full time. So excited about that, but a little echoey in here. So hopefully the audio is okay, but looking forward to introduce our guest today.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to that as well. So let's go ahead and give an introduction to him. So we get to talk to Bob Walczak, the CEO of MadTech, who has over 15 years of executive level experience in high-tech startups, driving growth as a part of an innovation team in disruptive technology businesses on the forefront of the digital marketing and advertising industry. So MadTech is a product-focused consultancy specializing in digital media and data. So we're very lucky to bring Bob in. So welcome to the show, Bob.
Thank you. Good to be here. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, awesome. Great to have you here, Bob. And so why don't you kick us off, get us started with a little bit of background, your background, and I'd love to kind of see if you can segue that into how that led you to create MadTech and exactly what MadTech is doing for its customers.
Sure. Yeah, I've been in the ad tech and programmatic category for north of 20 years, I guess, at this point. I founded a company called Ringleader back in 2005, and I have been, from there. Ringleader was a mobile ad server and mediation layer, and we were also known for our, or I almost say infamous for our probabilistic identifier called MediaStamp. We worked with companies like AOL, Microsoft, ESPN, Fox, to be able to power their ad serving on mobile specifically, and built that over about 7 years until exiting unprofitably, I'd say, and then ultimately becoming the GM and VP of mobile and emerging media at PubMatic. PubMatic's one of the largest SSPs in the category now, recently gone public. We built out the mobile emerging media business, which was pre-revenue when we started, and within 3 years was about $100 million business for them. I moved on from there. I ultimately became the head of product before moving on to BidSwitch, was a part of IPONWeb. Now IPONWeb's owned by Criteo, a public retargeter in the space, probably the largest. And as GM of BidSwitch, that platform was a one-to-many connector for SSPs and DSPs, essentially allowing for an SSP to plug in once and go into a dashboard and turn on any number of DSPs it needed, or in reverse, the DSPs being able to turn on the supply side of that. That one scaled very rapidly. Within a year, it was from 25 million to 125 million. So it was a high growth experience, building the platform. The technology is phenomenal, and it was kind of like the only true pure exchange in the marketplace, not taking a position in the buyer sell side. I'm going into a little bit of detail on that one because it's relevant to where we are now as MadTech. But from BidSwitch, I became the CEO of a company called Light Reaction, which is part of Xaxis, which is part of Group M and WPP. I ran that for about a year and helped them grow that. That was a outcome-based programmatic business. Ultimately became the global CEO or global head of product for Xaxis before leaving to start consulting independently. I spent about 4 years as an independent consultant, and you all know the story of COVID hitting, and with that, trying to figure out what's the new way life's going to be post pandemic, or following that, we had moved out of the city and, living in Connecticut, which is, and we're about, over about an hour and a half outside New York, realizing we're not going back with our kid and everything else. What was going to be a decentralized kind of work environment I could work in, and not be traveling back and forth to New York and work from home. And MadTech was born about a year and a half ago at this point. MadTech was, is a consulting firm. We're about 30 people now. We have a development team in India, and in the US, it's made up of product managers, marketers, data specialists, operations specialists, and project management. Our key focus is that by being a product focused or product led consultancy, every engagement conversation starts with product strategy. For our clients, we can do everything from product management, strategy, product development, marketing, as well as operations. So, helping companies build and take to market their products, as well as operationalize whatever we've built for them. As part of that, we ultimately started expanding into systems integration work. And as part of that, we saw an opportunity to build a platform called MadConnect, which, similar to the whole BidSwitch story, is a one-to-many connector for first-party data within the programmatic and ad tech ecosystem. Without going into too much detail there, is I think the rest of the podcast is really going to be talking about some of the things that this solves for. But with third-party cookies going away, there's a need for platforms to connect directly, particularly with the nature of first-party data. And those connections have started to multiply for companies. And there's always been a pain point based on the conversations we've had. So, our view was to solve that with a platform and a tool that allows you to just integrate once with us as a platform and allow your clients, publishers, or brands to be able to go in, toggle on a connection to any platform you needed to transfer data between for your ad tech stack or MarTech stack. And you'd be live within minutes, being able to send data between systems. And it'd be normalized in a way that could be ingested and formatted the way the receiving platform needed, and done back in reverse for the destination platform. So, that kind of brings us to where we are today. I'm looking forward to the rest of this conversation.
Absolutely.
Cool. Yeah, well, that's great. I think you hit on a really interesting point. It's something that we've been pushing for a long time, business-wise, but on this podcast since we launched it, is the importance of first-party data going forward. And I think ever since the announcement of the deprecation of cookies and all the policy changes going on with ad tracking and things like that, or data tracking, we've been saying that there needs to be a bigger focus on first-party data and how to use that effectively. And we've been talking on the show, a myriad of different ways that people can leverage their first-party data. And so I think it's a really interesting point. It's a good point. I think it's one of the things that that we set out to talk about today. And I think one of the things that, and I'm going to jump ahead, Jessie, just because we're talking about first-party data already, to our topic number 2, which is first-party versus third-party, because I think that it's a really interesting thing for Bob, for us to kind of get your feedback on, and listeners to be able to hear what your thoughts are around the issues with respect to first-party and third-party data.
Sure. Look, I think there's challenges, benefits, and opportunities with all of that. I would say that today, I don't think that third-party data is going away or is gone, and I don't think in the future it's going to go away either. I think there's just going to be different methodologies of leveraging it, and I think that we're kind of building a new form of infrastructure on top of the current railways, if you will, within the market, and trying to figure out how the worlds kind of play together. I think in a third-party data environment, there's the PII, personally identifiable information, is blown away and private, but it's also there's no opt-in about it. Third party is the audience targeting environment. The consumer is really left out of the equation from a privacy perspective, and makes it much more, it's why the shift has gone towards first party. We want to see opt-ins, we want to see consent from the users themselves. On the first party data side, it becomes much more sensitive and it becomes much more challenging to work with. When you're today, when ATT came out, app tracking and transparency from Apple, wiped out a bunch of identity and caused problems across the ecosystem, which, if you're listening to this podcast, I'm sure you've got an understanding of. It's also, with that signal loss, is, dropped it down to 15 to 20% of the market is identifiable via, Apple right now. And I think that has forced the market to reconsider how it's going to be managing its data, and has forced companies to react by thinking about how to get users to opt in, know their customers better, grab the consented a registered user, and then start figuring out what to do with that consented user. There's a lot of new challenges that we're facing to be able to get back to the level of effectiveness and engagement from an advertising perspective and monetization. I think that you hear a lot about retail media networks for that, because you have to know where to set, if you're buying something from an e-commerce standpoint, you got to know where to send it, which means you got a valid registered user, which makes it easier to be able to leverage that data for more effective messaging and marketing. The reason I say third-party data is not going away is because a lot of companies to date have really not spent a lot of time enriching their first-party data and their first-party profiles. So there's still a need for data enrichment on user profiles on a business by business basis, whether it's a publisher or brand, and companies have to figure out how to do that and build a deeper database and data set across their user base to be able to be more effective. I think the challenge with third-party data is I would say is recency. You're dealing with some information that may have been aggregated over longer periods of time. It's always been a thought that real-time context, real-time or close to real time, or the more recent the data and information is, the more valuable it is, right? So, knowing your customer was on your site looking for a pair of pants today is more valuable than in 30 days or 45 days from now, and still sending them the same advertising and messaging. I do think that, overall, this is a great direction for the industry, because I think that it's forcing companies to come together and collaborate, use things like clean rooms and CDPs in a more effective way, and that collaboration is better and safer and more privacy secure for the consumer, which ups the level of the whole business in general. And I think it's good for all. It's just a matter of how everyone retools and addresses that.
Yeah, I agree. And that's exactly what we've been saying for a long time. And third-party data, there's always been a data quality issue, lack of recency or unclear recency. Yep. Often you don't even know how old the data is. And often where you're getting the data sourced doesn't know. So that's always been an issue. And so that's something we've been monitoring for a long time, is data quality with respect to third-party data, and the importance of cultivating, and I think you use that word, people to cultivate their own first-party data, and the importance of doing that going forward. And now, like you said, I think there's so many opportunities to collaborate with data, and I think that that's just growing more and more as we go. So I think that's great and exciting for the industry as we go forward. I think that it opens up the opportunity for improved targeting, down the road. I think we're not there yet, right? I think that everybody's sort of struggling with how they're going to do that. But I think that it leaves the door open for us to find ways to improve that. So that's exciting. And I think that actually kind of segues interestingly into what was supposed to be our first topic, was data transfer and interoperability, because I think that the interoperability piece of that is really important. And so would love to have you share your thoughts on that as well, and where you see that going.
Yeah, the data transfer interoperability is something that, with Mad Connect, as we were talking about a little bit earlier in my introduction, was that, it's a key issue and challenge of the market right now. It's why we're still trying to figure out how to make first-party data as or more valuable than third-party data, because there's the challenge around interoperability. Platforms, typically have stayed away from first-party data for the privacy issues that were in the industry, and now you have to have those connections to be able to do business and engage brands that want to work with you as a publisher, or from a brand perspective to be able to gain value from your customer base. And so the thought is that with third-party data, you were essentially attaching a cookie, reading a cookie off of a browser, and essentially, in my mind, passing data between platforms using the browser as a mechanism for that. You would be able to, there's onboarders like LiveRamp attaching third-party data to cookie pools, and then you'd be able to create audience segments and anonymous IDs and use a third-party cookie to target and track and transfer data. With the absence of a third-party cookie, that whole strategy has to evolve. And I think you're now thinking about is there a way to do audience targeting with first-party data, and to do it safe and secure and opt-in way? And there is. It takes a lot more collaborations between businesses. It involves things like a clean room for data collaboration. It involves a lot of new piping. And I think what we've seen so far as a consulting firm space is that our clients are really, there's a lot of try, test and learn for, clean room tech and alternative IDs, and how to gain value out of those tools to be able to, enable the same effectiveness. Now, I don't think you're going to get to the same level of effectiveness because you're talking about significant signal loss. You're not, a third-party cookie was probably 70 to 80% penetration across the inventory in the market. With first-party opted-in registered users, you're talking about 20% at best, unless you're in the retail media networks again. So that aside, I think there's a lot of tooling that has to be dealt with, and I think you've lost signal across publishers. So that user is a new user across every single publisher, unless you use something like an alternative ID. But you're not allowed to transfer the data between the two, so you have to use things like a clean room to be able to collaborate offline, and then leverage that for online targeting or capabilities around audience. So there's I know I'm throwing a lot of terms out there and bouncing all over with it, but I think the first party and third party data, the interoperability challenges are significant because of this. And I think we're solving that on our side, with Mad Connect as a method, which is a way that platforms can connect in once, and then turn on connections between platforms. And the point of bringing that up, not just having an ad campaign here, is that what we found out, and the reason we went down this direction, was that the platforms don't have the engineering resource, or the engineers themselves have no interest in building connections. The connectors is a really laborious process, and it's not fun. A lot of engineers can do it. It's not like it's technically challenging or hard. It's painful, and it's death by 1,000 cuts, and it's not something they want to do. Nor, in addition to that, the company should really want their engineering resource, which is expensive, to be focused on the core platform and on innovation and on advancing their business, and not on things that are more commoditized like a connection. So, there's that challenge, which is no one wants to build the connections, but they're needed. We talk to CDPs that have 300 connections, and they have a backlog of over 200 connections that they still need to build. And that's a multiple CDP example are similar in those numbers, that the influx of new connections that are needed is significant. And we're not talking like no-name platforms that want to connect. We're talking about major names that are still waiting in the queue to be able to connect to these CDPs, and they don't have the resource to build the connections themselves. The CDP doesn't have the resource to support it. It's tangled and challenging. So, interoperability is absolutely required for our first-party data environment, and how that is enabled is going to be a critical challenge that the market's facing. And I think it's going to be resolved, knowing everything that we've gone through in programmatic and ad tech and the piping that has had to be laid there to be able to make that work. It'll happen. It's just going to take. It's just time. It's time and resource, and that's we'll see that evolve over the coming years. But it's got to happen pretty quickly in advance of the third-party full deprecation by Chrome, or you're going to have a bigger mess at that time.
Yeah, so that's interesting, and it kind of ties into our other topic, which was identity without cookies, right? So do you see, we have this situation where there's all these sort of third-party IDs out there, Ramp ID, Panorama, UID 2.0, everybody's got their own ID. There's probably 150 or more of them out there. So, and my thought has always been that none of those IDs are the ID of the future. And I'd be curious to get your take on that, whether you think that, much like myself, like those IDs are, ways for those companies to stay relevant, but not necessarily the solution. And where does the solution, is it interoperability between platforms like what you're talking about, where all these platforms are backlogged in doing it? And is there a couple of companies that win, where they end up with all the connections that are relevant? There's a lot there that I just spewed out, but I'm curious to where you think that all falls.
So identity without cookies, that shifts you towards alternative IDs. Deterministic IDs are still based off of something like an email or something that is, deterministically tied to a user, a phone number, an address. So there's a privacy challenge around that, of course. An alternative ID solves for that and obfuscates the identity, but it also allows for something that can be tracked. And as soon, you have to work very hard to get the opt-ins necessary to make that functional and scalable. What you've seen is that the alternative ID companies have gone out and given away their ID tech to the publisher side so that they can charge the brand and the buy side of the market to use it and have that effectiveness. And it's a land grab. So you named a bunch of the IDs in the market that are most relevant or known. I think the one maybe missed was ID5, which I think is the largest right now, has the deepest, the greatest usage and distribution. But it's also because, I think they're winning or doing well because they're the only ones that are just an ID company. They're not doing it to power their business. Like to your point before is, to stay relevant, UID 2.0 is was born out of, the trade desk, right? You've got, Ramp ID for live ramp, those businesses require identity and they need some kind of a solution in market to be able to, continue to do what they're doing. So they built them and they're, bringing to market under their business models. I think the question you asked is, which one's going to win, or is there going to be, a handful of winners? My hope is that there's one winner, of course, because I think that just makes it easier. There's only one third-party cookie, out there. So, that's very helpful, to making things scalable, from a technical standpoint. From an industry perspective, there's no chance it'll only just be one. But what it is forcing the publishers to do is integrate all of them. or all the top ones, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you know, because the more the publisher integrates, the more the more chance they'll get more brand dollars. You know, the brand's picking one ID while the publisher's, you know, picking 4 or 5, which is fine. I mean, I think that's, you know, what you're going to see. You know, I somehow liken this, and I don't know if it's true or, you know, it's maybe just the way my mind sees it from a business model standpoint, but I liken it to some of the, you know, verification companies and viewability companies like Double Verify or IAS Moat. You know, those guys, you know, what you saw is the publishers kind of had to accept all of those systems, and the brands had to pay for it. You know, I think we're, you know, there's still a long way to see what happens there. You know, the clean rooms have been, you know, this, you know, I think there's an interesting evolution happening on the clean room side. Beyond the fact that there's this challenge of clean room interoperability, which is an issue of, you know, if you're using InfoSum, you know, both parties have to be using InfoSum, and I know that is shifting right now. They're working on ways for interoperability so that, you know, not everyone has to license the tech to make it work, or you don't have to pick one. But you know, that's been the issue there. I think but you know, we start talking to those companies, I think where the market's moving, and I think where you're, you know, even in this interoperability conversation we're having is moving, is that data is not moving. You know, they're virtualizing data, and they're leaving it within the stack and within the platform. It's not to say it never moves. It obviously has to get in there somehow, but once there, it doesn't have to move to be able to be, you know, collaborated with, or you know, leveraged for insights across platforms. So I think virtualization is going to be a really interesting kind of component of the game here, and I think you know, that paired with identity and the game of how do you register a user. We worked with a client, we built out some tech for them to be able to help them with user registration. You know, thinking about you know, what are the triggers to be able to get a user to see have the value exchange to register, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's a key element of this, you know, world without IDs or without third-party cookies. You know, how do you evolve there? And that's something that every publisher should be thinking about, is how to capture more registered users, and, you know, and every brand.
It's an excellent point about value exchange. It's, you know, we've had that conversation as well, and it's super important. People don't realize the importance going forward of being able to capture that user, and the only way that you're going to be able to do that is to be able to sort of have that value exchange. And how do you do that? Obviously, it's different with every single business. If you're retail versus if you're, you know, a B2B platform or you know, a news website, you know, there's so many different ways.
Yeah.
But that value exchange, you have to be able to, it's getting, I think, more and more difficult, right? I mean, the user is always, you know, they're holding that email address close to them because they don't want to share it because their inbox is getting bombarded. And so you have to be able to show them that, you know, you're worth giving your email address to that, you know, that it's worth it for them to give you that email address. On
the, you know, the giving the email thing, that's a, you know, pre-show, we were talking a little bit about a company I'm an advisor to, Locker, that they, you know, there's a data resolution, right? It's whether you're going to get a machine generated email or not, and, you know, how do you verify that you spend all this effort and money to be able to capture a registered user, and then they give you a fake email address that you can never actually go back and use it again, or identify or get any value out of that. So, you know, you're having a transaction with a, you know, with an email that is non-valued, and you're spending, you know, maybe the value exchange was giving away something to get that, and now there's no ROI on that investment. So, you know, it is, I think there's going to be a strong need for, you know, ensuring that, you know, the registered users are valid and that they're giving you the right information. Like, that value exchange has to stand up. It's not something you like, you should just say, oh, well, I got what I got, you know, like it worked once, you know, and I think there is going to be a large segment of the market that's just not registered users. There's, that are, maybe they're using context targeting or something else. They have to figure out different methods for advertising and engagement and communication. And that's okay too. I don't think that that's a horrible place to be. It's just, what is your strategy on that side then? Where are you going to go all in? What are you thinking about? So there's a lot of dynamics to this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, if you rewind and go back, I think 2 episodes prior on Deconstructing Data, you'll hear a conversation about AI and ad tech. And I think that's where you'll see a lot of new uses in AI, where AI can basically look at every individual as an individual audience, in the sense that tracking what is happening at that impression at that time. And learning and trying to figure out what type of ad to show to that user at that moment, based on an AI engine that is studying billions and billions of transactions and impressions. So I think that you're right. I think that you're going to have an addressable audience, and then you're going to have this unaddressable audience. But there'll be some interesting technologies in AI that will be able to make those audiences more addressable as well.
So, Bob,
Agreed.
You are, I think, one of the first guests on Deconstructing Data since Fariba, which was probably a couple months ago, who has talked about interoperability. And it's such a buzzword. I remember, the BDEX sales team coming back from some trade show and telling us about interoperability, and then hearing it from Fariba. So for some of the listeners who didn't hear the broadcast with Fariba, who maybe aren't as familiar with the term, could you give a little history and context of interoperability?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think here's a good example. You've got, we worked when I was an independent consultant before MadTech. I was working with a publisher, and they had to do what I call a lift and shift. They're being extracted out of a publisher holding company and being bought by an independent buyer that had to stand them up on their own. And they had a $15 million digital business, but they had 15 platforms. But to extract them, their ad tech stack had to be rebuilt, basically. Meaning you've got, what I ended up identifying was there was 35 different technology platforms that had to be licensed for them to be able to manage their business. At 35 platforms, there's no value in those systems if they all stand on silos, if they're not connected. And interoperability means the connectivity between those platforms, in my mind. It's being able to transfer the insights from one platform to another platform that can leverage that to do its job, and then to another one. So if you take about, Salesforce as an example, as a part of a publisher environment, you got the sales team selling, they're bringing it to market, they've sold a deal, an IO is created. That IO has to transfer to the ad operations team to be able to flight the campaign. The data from the campaign has to be transferred to the advertising system to essentially, I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of the right term here. It's verify the impressions and the campaign was delivered, and that the brand received the impressions that they wanted to. I'm messing up the term for that platform, but it was Adjust or something like that, where they could they can send it back to the finance systems for billing. There was social systems that had to be connected in here, CRM systems. CRM today, the big revolution for CRM, as you've seen Salesforce, is they've built a CDP from their DMP, and it's a clear move for them. But the CRM world, is hugely valuable today. And if you think about the CDP environment, CDPs are essentially a connection hub in their own right, meaning they've got, most CDPs will have 300 plus connections, and it'll be data ingest and data export are the two functions of those connections or connectors that are built, connecting to that platform. And that's all managing to the golden record, meaning the user profile. So if you have a user profile that is, Bob Walczak. Well, it's also Robert J. Walczak Jr. And you have to, resolve that down to a single profile. I may have 7 to 10 different devices that have IDs that have connecting to, and all that has to be piped into a system that can reconcile that, attach other first party and third party data to it, and create audience profiles. Those profiles can then qualify for campaigns, for targeting, and then the reporting and performance of the campaign. Did I buy something as an effect of that? Comes back into the system, and they know that I bought a new mattress, and now I need to go buy sheets, so that you can send advertising for that product. It's a very tangled web within our industry, and interoperability is becoming more challenged with first party data and the use and requirement around that. And that's why we're seeing the term interoperability in the headlines constantly, because it's not, hey, like I've got a clean room for data interoperability, and data is not supposed to move once it's in my system, but how did it get in your system, and then what's the output of that, that collaboration for in the clean room, what do you take, where does the output go, and how do you take action and execute from that collaboration. So things, even with the clean room, there is interoperability requirements and needs for systems to connect to each other to be able to activate. It's a big challenge. That term is it's being used a lot for a good reason, I guess.
Yep. The challenge is as difficult as it is to say. So as the word is to say. So
Yes,
for sure.
Definitely. Well, we still have 7 minutes left, Bob. So if you don't mind, can we ask you a few questions about just yourself and your history for some of our listeners on LinkedIn? Well, I'm going to jump into that and just say, yeah, because, but Bob.
Sure, absolutely.
Wait, we didn't do our tech stacks.
Well, that's true. We didn't get to tech stacks. Oh man, I guess I was jumping to this because people in the audience were like, you keep passing over these questions about people's careers. So they love to hear like how you got to where you got. But before we get to that, we do need to hear about your tools. And I forgot we did that pre-show. So while
we'll do tech stacks quickly.
Very quickly. We're a Google email shop. We use Asana for project plans. Slack for most messaging and communication, internally and with clients. I'm personally an Outlook guy, but not many anyone else is. I like a single inbox for all my emails. I guess those are Jira, Confluence, those types of things as well from a dev standpoint, since we do development work. That's our internal tool set. What else can I provide on that front?
I think the one you mentioned earlier, I thought was kind of interesting. I'd never heard of. Was it Impractical?
mParticle.
Sorry, yeah.
mParticle is one of the top CDPs in the category. Particularly in the MarTech, ad tech category, MadTech space. Amperity is really good at data resolution as well. It's another good one. There's a bunch of CDPs out there. And one of our functions is on the systems integration side of the world is to be able to help companies do vendor evaluation and help them re-architect for this first party data world we're entering, or even build their current ad stack or MarTech stack, and bring the tools together and actually connect them, make them interoperable, right? All those things, that's one of the platforms, I guess, that we love. And, there's a bunch of clean rooms, there's companies that I'm advisors to that I think are great tools in this market right now. Safeguard Privacy is one that's, privacy compliance platform, doing great. They've had a lot of early success and are growing a great business there. Particularly, the compliance is around GDPR, CCPA, a very unique solution to that. There's Locker I mentioned earlier. We love those guys as well. I'm not only an advisor to them, we're also they're a client of ours that we work with on some of their tech. And they're solving some really hard problems around in the user registration identity space. They're doing it, in my opinion, in a in a way that's nice for, or plays well with the brands and advertisers in the world, not 100% consumer focused. It's protect the consumer and protect the brands and platforms that make this industry thrive.
Cool. That's awesome.
Right,
well, thank you for sharing those. Yeah, that was a good list. So I'll have a lot to tag in the comments. And yeah, I think this
quickly,
is the
Jessie, you can stick one more in.
Let's do it. All right, we've got 3 minutes. So Bob, could you tell our audience, what's one thing from your career path, your journey, that you would tell yourself when you first came in and started the industry now that you didn't know then?
It's a massive one. I think, when I was young and dumb and founded my first company at 25, I didn't know everything. And I think there was, after Ringleader, I went and spent good 7+ years trying to figure out what was next. In my career, I've been a CEO 3 times now, a GM twice, and a head of product twice. And I think that staying focused within the category has been very valuable to me. I mean, I've seen the market from the supply side, the buy side, and the infrastructure side with various businesses I've been involved with. I think learning a space in a category before just jumping in is important. And I think that there's in our industries particularly, I think one of the biggest learnings is that keep it simple, think about scale first, and then think about how to optimize once you've got to scale. That has been a critical lesson, I think, over years, is that grabbing scale first, meaning whether it's, and I've always focused on platforms, so getting a lot of users, getting a lot of transactions flowing, getting a lot of volume. This industry, the media industry, is very scale focused, and then once you've gotten to scale and you're in that position, it allows you to then think about, you've been very focused to get there, think about, how do you diversify from there and add more capabilities or functionality. But scale first is a big lesson I've learned.
Scale first. That's a big one.
Excellent advice. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you to everybody who showed up today in the live stream. And for those people, Bob, could you please let them know how they could find you after the show?
Yeah, madtech.io, or you can find me on LinkedIn as well. Pretty easily communicate there.
Sounds great. And David, I am excited to share with you that I added a ref code to our QR code today. So last week, and every other week, we always share in closing a QR code to Omni IQ, which, David, do you want to give a quick blurb of what Omni IQ is?
Yeah, real quick, running out of time, but yeah, Omni IQ is the best way to learn more about your audience and extend your audience for reach. So enhance your data, get free analytics, and find more people that look like your best customers.
Yes, literally just upload your first party data that we were just talking about and get complimentary analytics on it. So now when you scan this code, we will be able to see that you came from this show. So, thank you everybody who has scanned it in the past, and we ask that you scan it again. Let us know what you think of our tool and that you're hearing about it from Deconstructing Data. But other than that, I think that's a wrap for today. But we would love to hear from listeners. As always, reach out to us at info@bdex.com. And you can also reach David and I both on LinkedIn as well, and share your qualitative data with us so we can continue to make this better for you. So thank you so much for joining us, Bob.
Thank you. This is great.
Yeah. Awesome.
All
Thanks,
right.
Bob.
All right.
And that's a wrap.
That's a wrap. I'm going to close this out with an outro video. Till next time.